Okay, we're live.
Okay, we're live, and I'll call us back into session and go to the 10-year financial planning model. Fred.
Okay, Genevieve, probably best if I sort of drive. So I have my spreadsheet on my screen. Do I just select share screen?
Yep, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay. I think it's that one. Can people see that or?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. So this is our summary sheet for our 10-year financial forecast. And what all these cells basically are, linked from all these other spreadsheets, and it rolls up into the spreadsheet that you see today. I will come back to this worksheet. But for now, I'll just go over, basically the outline of it. All the revenues flow into what is called right here, the operating revenues. What it's called your direct operating expenses is for budget purposes. That's your materials and services. Allocated personnel, that's your personnel and services line. And if you take revenues less these two expenses, materials and services and personnel services, you come up with this sort of, operating income before your debt service and capital outlay. And so we do this ratio that I talked about in the fiscal policies, trying to make sure that we're somewhere between that, 2 to 6%, and we are there for the rest of the 10 years. And the reason why we look at that, that's just sort of like, okay, this is your discretion. After this, your operating income, it's sort of discretionary to your capital service and to your debt service. We aren't carrying a lot of debt service right now, and I'll go over that in a little bit. So sort of the rest of this comes down, and you can see the end of the year reserves. And what I do is I take the reserves that basically whenever we sell assets, it's a one-time event. And there's a poor policy, fiscal policy, that's not part of the three, but is that whenever we sell a one-time asset, we're going to use it towards a one-time acquisition of that asset. Usually a sell of land means I'm going to use it for, an infusion into some asset. And so all I do here is just say, here's our reserve from the sale of assets, sale of land. Like in the case of Expo is included in here. So I take away, so we don't ever use up our total reserves. I just earmark our reserves to show that, hey, some of it's really related to the sale of assets. And then what's remaining is sort of unassigned. This is a computation I do. Basically, this next line, this 10% of net depreciable assets, basically we take our assets and we grow over time, right? So in this model, we're doing more and more capital improvements, and those assets, depreciable assets, 10% of that, I'm trying to make sure that we have in reserve that amount. So this is sort of the check, do we have enough reserves that's in excess of that 10% rule? And basically we are. So that's what this check does. Let me go forward. So what drives this model is your base assumptions. In this page, I think it's your second page that's in your packet related to the 10-year financial forecast, is you have, and I have a little more than 10 years here, but basically the CPI, I look forward and basically on average, over a 10-year period, our CPI is hovering around 2.5%, a little bit less actually, but some years it'll be a little more. But so I use about 2.5% inflation going out into our costs and our revenue. And so that is this piece of the model that you see. And whenever a year comes about and I have that, then I basically put the actual CPI in place for that given year. And that sort of filtrates down here into your lease, your growth as a expense multiplier. Your revenue growth is dependent upon that. So these are all formulas that come into being. And then what I do here is for 2020, that's 0, but I'll get back to that. It's not a bust. It's because I was fuddling around. That's a new word, fuddling around with the model. So anyways, I'm going to chew that up a little bit after in the next couple of weeks. But the piece that I want to talk about in the model is this piece, this ETC toll. So what we've done is in the past, we would go about 5 years with the toll increase, but a toll increase after 5 years was much more significant. And it would be usually a quarter or more. And the reason why we did a quarter for people before we had our electronic system, we would always have to make change. And when we got our electronic system, our penetration, meaning our breeze buy customers compared against our cash customers, was about 50-50. And so half your customers are coming through the inner lanes and they're giving change. And so what you didn't want to do is make your toll increase like a nickel or something like that. And then our systems were such that they were programmed. This is the previous system, not the new one, that it would take a programming change to make those changes sometimes, at least to the back office side of things. So now, though, with the new system that when we went live in 2017, we have the capability and in previous discussions with the board, they were looking at, why don't we at least increase the tolls and keep pace with the CPI? And so if I were to do that in this next year, 2022, I'm showing about a nickel increase in the breeze buy rate. As you can see, breeze buy is about 80% down here of my overall customer traffic. It's a little less sometimes. It gets to that during certain times of the year, usually during the winter time when there aren't as many people coming into the community. During the summertime, it actually goes down because that's our big inflow of people from Canada and everywhere else. But here, if you were just to take the CPI over the last 3 years, since our last toll increase, it's about 7.1%, 7.2%, somewhere around there. So I just put in the, into that cell for 2022. And this would be for January 2022, about a nickel increase in breeze buy. Now that's in the model. This all has to go through the budget, has to go through, and even then it has to go through the commission if we want to do that. But what I'm trying to do is just mirror that there's this increase that's sort of catching up with just cost of living. And so that's why you see this increase in 2024, 2026, and then 2029. So we're just showing that as it goes along. This page does link to our bridge sheet and everything that relates to here. So I just want to talk about that. And then the rest of this this base assumption page talks about our administrative admin cost multipliers. We try to keep it in lockstep with regard to CPI, and then marina slips and so forth. So this is I just want to touch base on this. And then I want to move forward. I'm going to come back to the toll bridge. I'm going to come back to the bridge. I'm going to come back to marina, airport, so forth. But I want to go to our primary cost driver for the port. Our primary cost driver is not personnel and is not materials and services. It is capital. And capital is the most variable of all the costs that we have. So I want to push it over to the capital projects. And I forget, I think that's page 6 or 7 in your related to the financial forecast, and if you're just using the hard copy. But here is, can everyone see this okay?
Yes, very
Okay.
quick.
Yes, I can. Fred.
So basically, this, we spend a lot of time on capital because it is the primary driver within the forecast. And basically you'll see this again in the for the budget at the budget committee as well. We do make some changes, but basically what you see for each of these assets. And so what we have our industrial properties, Big 7, maritime building, and then we get into waterfront. And here, most of, like, for instance, with regard to the Big 7, we put $20,000, $30,000. We're doing some TI. We're always doing a TI sometime in one of these buildings at one time or another in a given year. So in the forecast, we place that out there. And we do that same for the maritime as well. And you'll see that for some of these others. But when it's other than a TI, we do start to talk about it. I want to talk about this piece here for Anchor Way. In this presentation, Michael was talking about Anchor Way. We have in the budget about 6. We will at least present to the budget that if you want to do this with regard to Anchor Way, then we will need about, looking at about $60,000 for just permitting to get that going. And then, as like Michael was saying, that, you saw about 1.5 million, 1.5 and change million dollars to look at doing that Anchor Way. And then, there's a possibility of an EDA grant. There's some loan capability at IOF, which turns into a grant possibility. And then and there's other grant possibilities as well. So that's why it's shaded. Anytime you see a number for the newcomers, anytime in this forecast or even in the budget committee, when you see a number that's red, it's basically saying that capital expenditure is debt related, it's funded by debt. And when you see a number that's blue, it's being funded by a grant. And when it's sort of a green or a purple, it's funded by debt and grant and some other funding mechanisms, just to give you an idea where these colors are coming from. But that's in the forecast that we talked about with regard to Anchor Way in our discussion. We also have some contingency here. For the newcomers, there was some stormwater damage that occurred to industrial property. It was HRD, and through this last, I'm going to say 18 months, the city has taken on the role of repairing that stormwater line. And if they go forward and they're still trying to figure out how they're going to fund the stormwater line. Part of it is going to be through grants from the lottery and from the state. There's a possibility of taking a loan out that can be converted into a grant at a later date. But there's also a possibility for the private landowners and the port is a private landowner, that we would have to pay into an LID. And so I'm just putting into the model, I don't know, this is just a placeholder, but if an LID is formed, we would have this contingency X amount. In this case, I'm putting $250,000 down. In either year, I don't know which year it's going to land, but I'm putting that in place. And I'm straddling that 500,000 over, better said, I'm straddling this 500,000 over 2 years in case an LID is formed. So that's where that is coming from. And then in 2023, we're looking at First Avenue, maybe doing some work with regard to First Avenue. That is in the model, as well as doing some more work in the outer years, 2026, excuse me. So I'll continue to go down. I'll get to the bridge, which is the meat of the capital outlay, but I do want to touch upon what is in the model right now that probably will be coming forward in the budget committee as well. So what we have for the Halyard building, we do have a small amount to replace a door. And then we have some exterior paint that needs to occur there on the Halyard building. Whether that gets approved or not, but that is a discussion item that our maintenance people thought, hey, this is something that we need to start looking at. We have a stormwater line repair at the Jensen building currently that we have a placeholder of about $50,000. It has more to do with the environmental impact with regard to DEQ than anything else. We are looking at about $114,000 for window replacement at the Jensen building in this upcoming budget, and then doing some alarm work too, and then a little door replacement as well for the breeze by doors at Jensen. So that's a little abnormal. So I'll touch upon the parts that will be coming forward in the budget process. State building, we need some painting that needs to occur for this next upcoming year, and a roof replacement will occur in 2023. We also, for the marina office, we're looking at a TI of about $15,000 and some other landscaping that will need to occur there due to the turnover that we're having there at the marina office building. Other people call it the chamber building, but I think everyone uses different terms for that office that's right south of the marina. So the port office, we do have we're carrying over some of the $120,000 that was budgeted this year, carrying some of that over to next year for just the upgrade to the building. There's a possibility that we'll need to do this, at least for COVID, to get ready to open the office here for COVID. And we also have some work to do over in the maintenance facility out back. The rest of it, a little bit of work for fan and concrete over in the timber incubator. The rest of it is just, like I say, placeholders that are out there. Wasco, some electrical upgrade, and a $15,000 placeholder. There again, I put out some placeholders in the forecast. The larger amounts is a higher TI that could occur in those later years. I want to talk about Hanel though. So Hanel, for next year, we're only going to put in about $25,000, and that's really just for the permitting for the wetland fill. And so there's not much, but in 2023, we are looking at doing more work there with regard to the wetland fill at that point in time. So coming into the airport, so here, the airport for this next year, we're looking at replacing some runway lights that need to occur and replacing some hangar lights with LED lights. And that's where the $62,000 comes from. The North Apron, so we have to finish up the North Apron project, although the Connect 6 grant and that project is completed, the FAA hasn't closed out on their piece yet and probably won't close out on their piece for probably a couple of years. It's not uncommon for that to continue. So I've just budgeted a little bit with regard to that in this next year. The big piece at the airport that we did talk about earlier in this presentation, not mine, but earlier in the spring planning presentation, was the $3.3 million construction of a commercial hangar out there. And that's going to be mostly funded through debt. And so that's where that number is coming from. Whether we agree with it or not, that still needs to transpire, but it's in the forecast as we speak today. And then some small hangar works that is going to occur, and also some, we had talked about the noise up at the airport. And for a long time, then there's different ways we can address this, but this right now is really, it's called it's a very expensive flight tracking system. We can use another system, but this system really does view what's on the airport itself and does track and give you the kind of reporting you need for the number of planes landing and taking off, and does provide some additional information. There are some other type of flight systems that maybe aren't as in depth and they're much cheaper, but all I'm doing here with regard to the financial forecast, I'm picking at least one piece and just sticking it in here, whether or not we go forward with this system or use another system. But I think staff would recommend a system to at least determine, the number of planes landing and taking off at the airport, just to monitor the noise level for our surrounding neighborhoods. Let's get into the bridge. So this is important. And in my write-up, I talk a little bit about it. So we have in our budget for this year, we have the House Bill 2017 $5 million grant, and just not the $5 million, but what's remaining in that grant that will probably extend into this year and a little bit for next year. But we also have, according to Kevin, we've gotten a $5 million bill grant that we have to go, and we got the paperwork in, and we need to get that finally approved from a contractual standpoint. And I'm hoping that we can get that done before the end of the year and start spending on that bill grant. Well, there is that $5 million bill grant also in 2022. And also what I've placed in here, although this is a forecast, so it's not a budget, but this is a forecast model. So we know that right now, at least what Kevin is telling me, right now in the Washington legislature, they have a placeholder, $5 million placeholder. It may or may not make it all the way through out of committee and through the legislature, but that's in place. And the port is working on another $5 million on the Oregon side for the engineering part of the replacement of our bridge. So instead of showing both, I just picked one. I just said, okay, I'm having one. Let's say I just get one $5 million grant. I didn't feel like keeping that as a zero because, there's probably a likelihood we might get one, maybe two, both. But that's what you see on this bottom half. And on the top, this 1.2 and the 3.9, that's the build grant that's occurring that we should finalize sometime before, probably before June of this year. So that's this top part of the capital projects for the bridge is really related to the replacement of the bridge. And then we get into the existing structure. And how I break it down is approach structures, foundations, superstructures, paint, deck systems, railings. I basically mocked how the bridge engineer looks at the bridge, and he looks at it in this fashion. So you can see that what we have is some brick, the overlay on the approach ramps that Michael talked about earlier. We have some work that needs to occur before probably the end of this year, but the majority of it occurring next year. And then it goes silent for quite a few years. We do have some scanning of and permitting related to the pier underwater evaluations occurring this next year and next year's budget. But as you can see, nothing is going on. But and here in 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2008 and 9, we have the pier cap rehabilitation that's out there that will be debt funded. So if at some point the replacement effort stops, you're going to see a lot more activity out here with regard to the work, the heavy or significant capital work that will have to occur to the existing bridge. So for now, on the existing bridge, we're trying to just get what needs to get done. We were doing a lot more inspection and evaluation. That's what you're seeing with the pier cap and bearing inspection. You're going to see a lot more steel repairs, whether they're railing or welding. You'll see a lot more of that here in these years, in the next few years. Basically, the bridge engineer is saying, hey, for miscellaneous steels, put $100,000 down. We're going to use that up for a while. So that's what you see in this forecast. And then when we get into, let me move this. We're getting into the superstructure for the truss spans. You'll see that tick up here in this later year. So in 2030, 2031, if the bridge replacement doesn't come to fruition, we will have a large amount of debt, and we'll have to look at rates as we approach that time period. And the forecast will have to reflect more of how that rate structure probably needs to increase before that date. So probably in 2026, 2027, we'll need to start having more conversations on rates and how they're going to fund the existing bridge if the replacement bridge doesn't move forward. And then you'll see again, painting of the deck trusses occurred out in 2029, 2020, 2030. All that work is being pushed out. We have some dollars for guardrail replacement. We have some dollars to analyze the rub rail replacement. Some deck welding will continue, and you'll see the $120,000 of just deck welding continuous. However, I think at this point, I probably need to change my model a little bit. If we do some deck replacement at this point in time, this probably needs to go away. Oh, I just found a little bust. Anyways, so that probably needs to go away if this actually transpires here in 2026, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2028, excuse me. And then we get into some of the others, the lift span. We're doing some engineering on the rack and pinion, and we're doing some work with regard to the shim on the south tower. And then some of the shaft work as well in this next budget. We haven't, if you walk on this trail that goes over to the Best Western, and if you come underneath the bridge, you'll see how that embankment, how right below the bridge, that embankment is sort of sliding down. That's what this piece in the budget is. It's basically to, abut that sliding of that embankment down. And we had it in this year's budget. It looks like we're just going to slide it into next year as we get more time. This is a placeholder. There's a lot in here for the tolling. Some of it can be deferred. Some of it may not get deferred. One of the tolling system, and we spent a lot on our tolling system over the last several years. But what is occurring nationally is that all tolling agencies are going to need to speak to each other. Meaning anyone that has a home base, if I'm out of San Francisco and Golden Gate is my home, and I cross that bridge, and I just so happens I come up to Washington and Oregon, and I cross our bridge, the Federal Transportation Department is saying to tolling agencies, you need to start to be able to talk to each other so that if someone from the Golden Gate Bridge crosses Port Hood River, then basically it's an IOU. I send an IOU to their account at Golden Gate, and then Golden Gate passes the money to us. And that's called interoperability. And that's happening throughout the country. It is in tests right now. I don't know if someone were to tell me, well, you know, this can get pushed to next year. It can be pushed to next year. There's no doubt. But I will say it is going to occur. I don't think any tolling agency out there will be saying, well, we're not going to do this, just because I think there'll be more of a federal mandate to have this occur. One of the things, the other piece is this signage. So when one of the things we don't have on our bridge is we have static signage. If you come up to our bridge, you'll see prepaid tolls, and then all other tolls come into a certain lane. And then that's it, it's just static signage. What the CMS signage does, it basically electrifies what is static up there. And basically it's more like if you ever came out of PDX, that's more like the signage that can occur. You can have different messaging on there. You can actually shut down a lane and it'll say close, go to, you know, the other lane. Or if you have an event where, like we had during the COVID event back in April of last year, we shut down, or we basically opened up the bridge, and that signage can act as a signage board as well. So that is one piece that I'm putting out there. Does it have to occur this year? No. Is it something that's nice? Yes. Is it something, if you went to an all-electric tolling, you would need? Yes. If we went to all-electric tolling, we would need that kind of electronic signage up above our toll facility. I also have in here this PCI compliance. I may take it out. We might get that done before the end of June. If we don't, I'll have to put that back in. And then Twilio, basically our phone system is just a small phone system. Basically, we have people come up, they write messages down from the voicemail, and then they call customers back. And when the COVID event occurred and we had to go to all electronic tolling, we didn't have our toll collectors in the booth. There's a fear that I wasn't going to be able to get our front office into the office to take messages and phone call people back or phone them back. And so Twilio, basically what it does is anyone can sit at any desk. In fact, a customer service representative could sit at home and bring up their system on their desktop, and basically it brings up all the phone messages, and we can tell how many people are on hold, how long they had to wait. It's a real phone system of software for a customer service system. So that is will be presented as well. And the last piece is AWS is basically 32,000 for AWS. That's really Amazon. That's their cloud-based system where we can then take all our data and place it in the cloud and not have to always rely on just our IT room. So let me keep going. The marina, we have with regard to the marina, we have an ongoing like $15,000 out there just in case for whatever that purpose is. But for this next year, we do probably will be receiving a grant with regard to our boat ramp that's out here and repairing the dock with regard to that boat ramp. So that will be in the budget, and it's in dire need to do that. And then we also have some float repair capital improvements to be made for the marina. Marina Park, we need some LED lighting on that footbridge over there. That is something that, and we need to also, now and then, it's like every 4 to 5 years, we have to replace those wood, some of the wood gets either warped or it gets cracked, and we have to replace that wood that's on the that goes across that pedestrian bridge. The other piece has to do with Marina Beach signage and some electrical work there in and around Marina Park, and then some picnic shelter design work for another picnic shelter. Whether or not we want to do that, but our picnic shelters are used constantly, and we feel that there's probably there is a need, and it would be a revenue generator for the Marina Park. At the event site, we're putting in a little landscaping, and then we also have some at the event site. There's that dock, and we need to do some additional dock repair work that's going to extend out of this year into next year with regard to that. Hook, we have some tree replacement that needs to occur at the hook. And CGOCC, they have some art that they want to, present to us that I put in the forecast that may or may not go forward. We'll see. And then some rigging with regard to up at the hook, and some grading work that needs to occur for both the spit and the hook. So I know that's a lot to gather, but what I'm saying is, this is where the majority, as you can tell, the dollars, you can just tell how big the dollars are with regard to capital as it's compared to personal services or materials and services. The model for all the capital that you have here, we also have the other side of the equation, which is some of the grant work. Here we go. When I earlier talked about the grant work with regard to the water lot 1 and then Anchor Way, and here's some of that grant work that offsets some of that capital, if not all of it. Likewise, we have all the work with regard to the airport. We, like I said earlier, if there's, in this case, the commercial hangar, we're using debt to finance that capital expenditure. And then here's all the other FAA grants, their NPE grants. And then we also have, when the FAA provides you a schedule, they provide a 5-year schedule of what we, the port, have as far as grant and how we're going to receive that grant. There's about 1.17 million sitting out there in 2024 for us to use. And that, if we were to do, let's say, some of the T hangars north of the taxiway, then the work that goes from the taxiway to those T hangars could be, this grant could be utilized for that. And then the bridge, which we have here, is under the grant, we have the build grant. We also have a little bit of the HR 2017 in here. We also have the $5 million. I just assume either Oregon or Washington gives us $5 million, and that is basically stratified over the years 22, 23, and 24. We do have a visitor dock grant, possibly in, or for the, I have visitor dock, this is for the ramp itself, the grant from OSMB, excuse me. So what the picture I'm trying to show you is here's this grant, here's all this capital, here's the grant, and then the other piece that pays for the grant is all the debt service within this model. And then basically there's other worksheets with regard to this model that basically says here's the debt and here's the debt service related to that. And so you see for certain pieces of our property, we don't have that much debt anymore, right, as we speak, but we still have the Jensen debt that is still out there that got refinanced in this current year. And then we have this, we also have the bridge. Some of that debt starts, as you can start to see in 2022, there's a possibility of some debt there that moves all the way through, and through 2028, it starts to ramp up. And then we do have marina. We have two debt issuances for our marina, and this is their debt service related to that. The first debt that was 2010, it expires in 2025, and the 2013 expires in 2028. So all this gets funneled into each individual asset center. And let's talk about the bridge. So I know this is a lot, but this is the model. So everything sort of rolls in and then rolls over to the main sheet that we started with. And it's based on these assumptions. And basically, I can show you like this year's. This is sort of based on the budget that we have. We figure we're looking at a budget close to about $5.8 million, or a forecast of about $5.8 million for the bridge. It probably is going to be close to that, maybe a little bit under by about 8%, as we're seeing that the COVID hit to traffic is slowly coming back. I don't know when it's going to come back 100%, but it is coming back. Some days it's back, some days it's about 6% lower than last year, but at least that's what I'm showing. But in this forecast, basically I'm just showing here's your revenue and here's your expenses. We have some cable lease revenue. We have other revenue that's basically from, we are the back office for the Port of Cascade Locks. They use our tolling system. We get some of their revenue. We also get some other revenue. And this year we received more of the COVID. We're receiving some of the COVID relief, earlier COVID relief acts that came through Congress, like the CARES Act, and there's another subsequent amount that we received. So the part that I'm trying to get to here is whether it's the bridge, whether it's the marina, whether it's recreation assets, airport, all of them look like this. You have a revenue component that's over here, that's driven by, if you're rental property, it's driven by lease and square footage on lease, on your leases. And then you have your expenses. You have utility expenses, you have maintenance expenses, insurance, other expenses like miscellaneous, professional services, and then this column called allocated admin. This is personnel services. So basically I gear up what that would be in total. Then I have to basically look at our latest discussions with staff and allocate where they think they will be working in which asset center throughout the year. It's more a percentage of what that looks like. Percentage of some folks may be predominantly bridge and just a small amount for the waterfront. Or someone may be predominantly the airport and a little bit everywhere else. So that gets allocated out into the toll bridge, marina, recreation assets, airport, and our industrial properties. So this is how I build the model. And as you see in the into the future, they're driven more by that assumption, that base assumption. What do you think my inflation would be? And we're thinking about 2.5%. And so those costs are, in the model are rising at that clip. Unless I know something a little different in a specific year, I won't do anything. If I know it, I will change it. And then you come into the latter part of the model, which basically pulls all your capital. This is all coming in from the capital worksheets. And if your grants, it's coming in from your grants, or in the case, it could be also a piece of debt. So again, red is debt, blue is grants, and an off color, whether it could be purple or green, it's a combination of grant and debt. And so I will, as you can see, the growth of the bridge is key, and this is what Steve was talking about. He was taking some of these numbers out in 2029 and what we would be looking at in 2029. So the other, as you can see, I'll go on to the marina. I know we only have X amount of time, but the marina is the same way. It's not driven by traffic, it's driven by slips. We have 165 slips, and part of that is houseboats, nine houseboats. And so, and we derive, what that annual slip rate is, and that gets distributed across on another sheet here, but then what rolls back is more of an aggregated rate. And we can see, and then the rest of this looks very similar to the bridge, and all of it looks similar. You're going to have utilities, you're going to have maintenance, you're going to have insurance, other expenses, professional services. And that, a lot of those costs are promulgated from the year that we're in. And so if all of a sudden we're starting to see a trend in, let's say, the marina, that our insurance rates go up, then the future years, the rates go up as well. And then, as you can tell, debt and capital outlay here on the outer part of this schedule, that gets pulled in from those worksheets. And that's the model. I don't want to get too involved in it, but the model replaces is the same. I think I gave you each of these worksheets. What we call recreation is what we call Marina Park, the event site, and Hook, Spit, and Nichols are they have different cost centers or asset centers within our financial system, but they're basically looked upon on the forecast as one, just to cut down on some time. And it's just the materiality of the three put together. But that's recreation, and basically what we're looking at, we have our investment, we have our lease revenue. There are some lease revenues. The big piece coming out of recreation is parking. We have at the event site booth during the summer, we get some of that parking, as well as we get some of the parking, the street parking that's not here in recreation, that's over in lot 1, because majority of the street parking is in and around lot 1. But same issue here, or same look. You're talking about your expenses are basically the same with regard to utilities, taxes, maintenance, insurance, professional services, and then capital and grants come into play throughout this model. The same holds true for the airport. And then commercial properties are a little different. We have sort of a what we call rent capitalization, utilization. And this worksheet is sort of like an assumption worksheet that flows into, and that's why I didn't give this to you, because it's pretty busy, as you can see. It flows into the model for our properties. And our properties are just that, except here we put our lot 1, our industrial land, basically is lot 1. That is in here, as well as our industrial properties, Big 7, Maritime, Timber, Incubator, Wasco, Jensen, Halyard, and then our commercial properties are here. the state office building, the marina office building, the port office building. And so the same makeup here. So unlike the rest, the revenue driver is your square footage and your price per square footage going forward that's driving your annual rent. And we do get some land leases out of our lot one, and then the rest of it's the same. Utility expenses driven more from our past experience. And when we see, like with regard to Pacific Power and Northwest Natural Gas, where someone or utility giving us notice that they're going to have a rate increase, we do go into the model, we make that increase. But the rest of it's the same, and it mirrors everything else that you see in the other worksheets. This one has an FTE component to it because we're looking at jobs on industrial property. But here's your capital and your grants as well coming into it. So there's a lot. I'm sorry, I'm trying to go as quickly as possible, but not leave you totally behind. And then this gets rolled up into here. It gets rolled up into this detail roll up, which basically rolls into here. And so as you can see, for 2022, we're looking okay. 2023, we're depending upon if this will change. I shouldn't say anything more. All I know is the forecast does change. As soon as it goes out, it will change within 6 months. So, but I want to just open it up for questions. Whoever wants to ask a question, please do.
Fred, I have one question, or not really a question, but something I wanted to point out as the budget committee takes all of this into consideration. It is a lot. Because of the preferred alternative of the bridge, of the proposed new bridge, it does end up going on port property, and it will affect the yard area and it possibly the port offices. And so I just want us to be mindful of allocating, you know, maintenance funds or improvement projects on those two buildings, because we might need to reconfigure or move or change or something along those lines as we get closer to a new bridge. And then the second question that I had is, you had money allocated to correct some of the hillside underneath the bridge, and I'm wondering what if there is a safety urgency to do that soon, or is that something that we could again incorporate that project into simultaneous construction of a new bridge?
I'll leave the embankments floating to Michael, since he knows a lot more about that than I do. But I know that with regard to the maintenance, when that new bridge goes into place, that funding will need to take, basically pay for some of the land that's being taken, and also maybe some mitigation with regard to our buildings. So.
Yeah, I just reiterate that the project, the reason you go through the EIS is to identify impacts and identify mitigation. So the presumption is that if there is an impact to the port facilities, that the bridge project would mitigate for that. If it requires moving, reconfiguring a portion of our yard or shop, or even relocating, that would be incorporated into the bridge project. The specific one you mentioned is just some erosion that's occurring underneath the approach ramp next to the pedestrian path. It's a really modest amount. I think what did we budget for that, Fred? It's
about 40,000 I got.
Yeah, and it will probably cost in the order of 20 or 25. So that is something that's needed to forestall or prevent the erosion that's occurring under there. And that does need to take place in the next couple of years. Fred, I had a question, or at least I'd ask you to point out that COVID relief has been something that we've sought and we have received, or we expect to receive some funds. The big one, of course, is the most recent one from the omnibus bill, and that's targeted at $477,000. assuming that we do receive those funds, would those be this fiscal year? And would they be part of the carryover? And how much has we received from the other tranches
In
last?
total, I showed you the bridge. We had some piece of the bridge CARES Act. Okay, let me back up. So the CARES Act, I think they eventually gave us around 170,000, something like that, 175,000. So some of that's reflected in the bridge worksheet and some of it is elsewhere. The big piece that you're talking about is this bill that just got passed back in what, November, December?
December, yeah.
Yeah, and that's for revenue loss. And actually the IBTTA, the International Bridge, Tunnel, and Tolling Agency, or association, they were really important in putting tolling agencies included in that bill. And because of that, we'll probably get around, what, $570,000?
No, 477 is what OTC.
Oh, did they chop it? Okay.
So that would be part of if it's received this fiscal year, it'd be part of the carryover to next.
Yeah. So that will have, that will bring us closer to whole, basically. Yeah. I'm sure it wasn't that boring, guys. I'm sure there's some
No,
excitement.
Fred, you got a couple of questions in chat.
Oh, okay. Can someone read? Let me see.
You don't have, I can read them.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. It says from Chris, says philosophically, the port has the port articulated a position about the extent to which users should pay for the services they use. That would impact decisions about potential funding for recreation in particular. And I guess you got the hot seat right now. That's a question that is.
Yeah, I'll let, I can put my 2 cents and then let someone else take over. How's that? So I think previous boards have always said that, users should pay for their activity. So whatever the user, they should be paying some sort of fee if they're using something. Bridge, recreation, so, and there's more and more evidence that public agencies are going more and more to user fees because, if you use it, you pay for it. So whether the board wants to, that's a political issue with regard to what you want to do, because, but it's hard to have a user fee on something that has an economic benefit to the area, because people, go to the restaurants and they sleep in the area at a hotel. And so what you don't want to do is user fee someone too much to where you don't get the other economic benefit. So, I mean, that's my viewpoint. I'll let anyone else talk about it.
Yeah, that is a great question, and it just strikes at the heart of a number of other questions that the port needs and has addressed. The closest that I can think of that comes to a policy that articulates that is that waterfront narratives that the commission received from Genevieve, I think yesterday or this morning. But fundamentally what it translates into is there's certain use areas that have a high impact and are high use and therefore high impact and require significant resources of people power to be spent on it, maintenance, irrigation, things like that. And frankly, that there's an opportunity to secure or obtain some sort of user fee in that area. But there's other parts, especially the waterfront, that we are a public agency and provide a service to the public. And in the past, I've said we're the largest county provider or park provider in 3 counties. And when you look at Marina Green and you look at Marina Park and you look at the swim beach and all that, there is it's almost an underlying philosophical an attitude about, do we not provide some areas where people with less robust means, limited means, can come and picnic and hang out with their family without exacting a fee from that. And so there's sort of what's emerged as sort of a split on the east side of the Hood River, Marina Park, Marina Green, is fundamentally for people that can picnic and, you know, be there without paying anything. Whereas the event site and just the parking on Portway and First is an area where there's higher use, higher demand, higher expenses, and there's an opportunity to obtain some fees for that. It's a really great point, and it's a underlying philosophical question that the commission needs to consider whenever they're considering revenue enhancing initiatives.
I think a specific question from Mike Travis, if the admin for the bridge in 2021 was 1.5 million against a total of 2.8 total allocated personnel. So that's 54% of staff are associated with bridge. And the real question is that correct? And if the bridge goes away, would 54% of his existing staff also go away?
Not necessarily. So Mike, what we have is you have 12 toll collectors that have 5 shifts, 365 days a year. So some of that is your toll collectors. Now, someone could say we can go to all AET and the toll collectors go away, but the cost doesn't go away because you will have additional costs related to that. So hopefully that helps you. Just to give you a makeup, so we have 12 toll collectors, but we have 8 maintenance staff, and we have, excluding our bridge person, I think we have 2, 4, 6, about 7 sort of office folks. So give you an idea of the magnitude. And all of our costs are broken out. Some people are much more bridge related than others. Naturally, our customer service staff, oh yeah, I mean, we have a customer service staff that's 90% just bridge because that's all she's doing is answering customer phone calls on Breeze by customers. So
it sounds like if the new bridge, we don't have tolls, just say, then we don't need those toll operators.
correct, if you don't have tolls. So
Likewise, if somebody else is owning the bridge, like maybe ODOT or WDOT or somebody else, they're probably going to be doing their own maintenance on the bridge. So those people would not be employed more than likely by us doing that work unless we are subcontracted back. I mean, I'm not making a criticism here. I'm just trying to understand your numbers.
that's correct. I mean, if you said the bridge, we have a fully funded bridge, no debt out there, then maybe you're right. I mean, you could possibly write on a new bridge with regard to maintenance staff, but with regard to tolling you would only use if you wanted to, if you have debt. So if you have debt, then you would have a tolling staff probably. You would have customer service staff because people need to sign up for an account, make payments and so forth. So
No, I understand that.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I've got one other one while you're there that I wrote in too, and trying to understand what we're doing out at the airport and providing a hangar and so on and other facilities. And I'm not making a criticism, I'm just asking, what's the vision of that airport in 20 years from now? What are we trying to make it into?
I'm going to start and I'll let Michael answer the rest. Huh?
I can jump in if you want.
Go ahead.
That future vision that you mentioned is really under discussion right now within the context of the strategic business plan. Over the last several years, there's been very significant an increase in usage in certain ways, certain aspects of training, Cub Master Factory training site, and an emphasis on pilot training. That has gone away. So it's changing, and it's changing in ways where we need to collectively anticipate what that future vision is, drive it back through what essentially a business model is, and we need to have public input into that. So there's no the defined vision right now is what's defined in our strategic business plan dated 2014. It's very different now. And it needs to be articulated and reflected back to the community and get public input and solidified as part of this strategic business plan update.
So where I was going with this, Michael, and I get it, I understand it. If we're going to go make major investments in the airport, are we at some point in time looking to get a return on that investment? And if we're not, okay, I understand that. But if we are we building the right things? And are we targeting moving in the right direction to be able to get that rate of return off of it? In other words, like as an example, are we trying to make it into a regional airport?
Yeah, the answer, I could say that. The answer is absolutely not. It's a 3,000-foot runway. It's a VFR airport. Right. It's constrained by topography and other factors.
And noise.
Concern about noise.
Yep.
So it has significant constraints. It does have opportunities. I will say that, like with just what we talked about with the waterfront parks, is the airport has an element of public service to it. If there's a fire, there's a response site, and the helicopters come in and they stage off of there. If there's an emergency in the mountains and there's a search and rescue underway, like it happened in 2006, it's an asset that can be very significant for those emergency response situations. It does have an economic impact, and there's other very positive things about it. So it has to be we have to like recast or reconsider the airport within its competitive strengths and its weaknesses, and consider the impact on the community. I will say that the commercial hangar is one that, at this point, the commission hasn't made a decision to build a hangar. We've just initiated architectural work on it. It does, at this point, appear to hit numerous targets, including connecting to the technology community, some element of job creation, without a significant impact from a noise profile. It does have to cash flow, and the preliminary pro forma is all about making sure that we're hitting a market need, we're hitting a market price, and we're able to have positive cash flow off of that to contribute to the larger question or challenge about funding in the future.
The other thing I'll add, Michael and Mike, is you talked about the economic generator that the airports has, but the airport's unique because FAA funding is still 90-10. So there aren't that many grants out there that you could get 90% funding for. There just aren't. And airports is just one that is still available out there.
But again, even if we get grants for it over the long haul, we're going to have to maintain it. That's going to cost you some money.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as you got revenue coming in to at least offset that,
Correct.
maybe it makes sense.
Yes.
And Mike, I'm not speaking on behalf of the commission. I'm speaking on what I understand the commission has talked about in the past, is that there are a lot of employers in flight related industries that airport space would be a really good fit for them. And the great thing is that a lot of those industries that are wanting to locate in the gorge, they don't necessarily have anything to do with actual flying, which is something that I know that the commission has said in the past that they would like to encourage those types of businesses, so we can get, we can continue to get this great funding with the 90-10, but we're also not increasing businesses that are going to create flight patterns that generate a lot of excessive noise for the surrounding community. And commissioners can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay. Well, we're 9 minutes over schedule.
Not bad.
Not at all.
That's not bad. Yeah. Does anybody have any wrap-up comments? Yeah. Or excuse me, Genevieve, are we capturing the chat questions for future?
Yes, that they'll all be recorded as part of the record of the meeting.
There's a couple, three that staff could answer in the future, mostly from Mike regarding, stuff that's more easily answered
Yeah,
directly, I think. And I could say, Mike, the chat questions, then we'll get staff answers.
John, Mike, or Michael, this is Locke. Hey, I just wanted to thank you all for opening the meeting to us. This is incredibly helpful and a very interesting conversation. So I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Doc. Yeah. In that case, I'll close out the budget committee meeting, or the spring planning work session, sorry.
Planning, yes.
Yeah. And we're gonna take, can we start before 5 o'clock? Is Jerry
Yes.
on?
Yeah, the meeting is noticed that it will commence immediately upon the adjournment of the spring planning work session.
Okay,
So, but I would like to ask for a 5-minute break so that I can shift gears on the live stream to have it be a different stream.
so we have a different live stream.
Yeah.
And
But the same Zoom meeting, so everybody will just stay signed in that's staying for the regular session and everybody else is excused.
okay, and anybody that signed in is free to stay because it's a public meeting. And I'd particularly invite Chris and Becca, if you'd like to speak later about when action items are considered for budget committee assignment. You're welcome, of course. Yeah, I understand it's been a long haul already, so certainly not necessary if you don't want to.
Thank you, John, but I have another commitment at 5:30, so I'll have to leave.
Okay,
So if we could just take a couple of minutes of break for me to stop and restart the live stream, I'll do that now. If
yeah,
we're
reconvene at 5 o'clock, a little after.